Welcome to The Helping Conversation, an exploration and celebration of the practice, art, and science of facilitating trusting, safe, inclusive, and effective helping conversations with others. The helping conversation is at the core of the sacred partnership between two people when one is there to help the other. Recorded at RockVox Recording and Production Studios, Rochester, New York. Find your voice and broadcast it to the world at RockVox, rockvox.com. And now your host of The Helping Conversation, Keith Greer.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, as always, for sitting in with us on another episode of The Helping Conversation. We are going to, as usual, move in a very different direction from how many of you probably think about the helping conversation, because as you have heard me say in previous episodes, this is not just a conversation that is done by the traditional helping professions of psychology or social work or coaching. We really want to use this show as an opportunity to highlight a cross-section of people who bring their own unique style and thinking and skill set to helping others. And so would you join me in welcoming our guest? And I'm very excited to say our first Zoom guest. So this is groundbreaking for all of us here, Suzanne Palazzo. Good morning, Suzanne.
Good morning, Keith.
Let me fill everybody in a little bit on who Suzanne is, and then we're going to jump in to the type of helping conversation that she facilitates in her world. In motion more often than not, Suzanne Palazzo is an empowerment coach whose philosophy is heavily rooted in the concept of mind over matter. She's guided by her belief that both the body and mind were designed to progress, even if moving forward requires taking a step back to reflect. In 2015, Suzanne founded Upper Deck Fitness, an award-winning fitness system that has grown to include a virtual gym, as well as multiple in-person facilities in Stamford and Westport, Connecticut. She is also the founder of Badass and Beautiful. We definitely have to talk about that. A blog and podcast with a wide-reaching following of people determined to be better than they were yesterday. A native of Stamford, Connecticut, Suzanne holds a Bachelor's of Fine Arts from Fordham University, the Alley School, and a certificate in holistic health coaching from Columbia University's Teachers College. She has served as the health and fitness director for the Darien Y, as well as the training and program director for Chelsea Piers, Connecticut. In addition to being a proud recipient of the Fairfield County Business Journal's 40 Under 40 Award, Suzanne has been featured on Today and has had her work published in Fit, Yoga, and Dance magazine. And again, join me in welcoming Suzanne Palazzo. So let's jump in, and I will start this conversation where I always do, which is tell us a little bit about your journey that got you to where you are as a gym owner and a fitness expert and a wellness coach.
Sure, absolutely. And it certainly hasn't been a straight line. I don't think the good journeys usually are. I used to dance professionally, which is ultimately how I landed in the fitness world. But there were actually a lot of stops and twists and turns along the way. When I left the dance world initially, I actually landed in the publishing world by choice. So I used to be an editor for various trade publications. And at that point, interviewing was a large component of my job. But ultimately, I got really tired of sitting behind a desk all day. I'm a mover, I'm a physical being. So it was at that point that I segued into the fitness world. And after being a trainer for several years, I got very interested in more of the management side of the business, in particular developing programming and systems that could help clients and certainly large membership bases the most. So I segued into that next, kind of focused on the big box gym model, the big fitness club. And then after several years of kind of wanting to do things my own way and hitting a lot of resistance, quite frankly, in the corporate world, I eventually, branched out and created Upper Deck, which we say is more than just a gym. It's certainly a lifestyle brand, but above and beyond that, it's truly a mission to help people, as you're getting at here, and And if I could take that a little step further, I'd say to help people get out of their own way.
Right, right. Boy, I know I'm guilty of that, especially when it comes to my physical health, my own
You're
worst
not
enemy at
alone.
times. So one of the things I'm always curious about with our guests, and this is, I always frame this is a bit of a bias of mine in that so many people in different versions of helping professions, when I talk with them, there seems to be evidence from early on in their life that they were destined to help another person. And maybe the specific way we all do it is a little bit different. So I'm curious, as you look back, would there have been evidence early on in your life that playing a role in helping others improve their lives was somewhere you were going to wind up inevitably?
Sure. It's funny. Even today, I don't necessarily know that I view myself as helping others, which might be interesting in and of itself. I'm
Mm-hmm.
very aware that I do that fundamentally. And I think everybody knows how good it feels to help somebody else. There's just that inherent, rather immediate reward that you get from playing a role, whether it's small or big in that process. I will say I've always been a critical thinker and a problem solver. So particularly with my client base, early on as a trainer, a lot of what fueled me was trying to get a better sense of why certain people saw results when others did not. Because it certainly wasn't as simple as eat this, not that,
Right.
or to do this particular workout. There was more going on behind the scenes, particularly when they weren't with me. And I learned that I had to start asking some important questions to get at the heart of that in order to truly help them see their goals.
Right. So I totally get that because I see in my world, there's such a parallel in that in my work with folks, if it appears that goals aren't being attained, it could be really easy for me to say, as the helping person, well, that's my client's fault, versus
Sure.
engaging in some of that critical thinking of, all right, what's missing? What else do we need to talk about? So in your world of helping people around fitness, I'm really curious, what have been some of your findings of where some struggle, as you would say, getting out of their own way and some don't?
Yes, absolutely. Because I would say more often than not, the kind of secret to success has nothing to do with the workout per se or the eating plan. Those things are prerequisites and they're definitely important. But where the real magic happens is when myself and my staff address what we call primary foods. This is a theory that is rooted in the concept that there are a lot of things that nourish us, that satisfy us. Everything from our career to our relationships, our spirituality, our ability to be creative. And one of those areas, and again, there's several, are education, stress regarding finances. When one of those areas is thwarted or we're struggling with that, things typically tend to kind of ricochet into the way we're eating, the way we're treating our bodies. So we really have to take a look at those other areas in order to properly serve our client base. This is why so many people, when it comes to their journey with their bodies and their health and well-being, they might see results for a limited amount of time, but they're very temporary, right?
Right.
And we're really working with our client base to make a lifestyle shift, and so that they have long-lasting results, and not just the results, but the strategies to maintain them.
Right. So what I'm wondering about, just to make sure that I'm hearing you right, is that I think, as someone who has looked in and has always put a bit of a focus on physical fitness in my life, I do think there's been this historical narrative that taking care of your physical fitness is getting to the gym and eating right. End of discussion.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
And
100%.
right, probably part of the reason why it doesn't work for so many of us. So I hear
Exactly.
you talking about really challenging the folks you work with to look in,
Yeah.
which I'm curious might not be what they thought they were going to be asked to do by somebody like you.
No, 100%. That's why we say we're more than just a gym, but no amount of marketing could really properly convey this. They need to get involved in our system and start to experience it. And we do kind of start with baby steps in terms of going on this exploration together, because as we've discussed, we need to establish trust.
Right.
But I always say, if it was as simple as eat this, not that, everybody would be doing that and everybody would look awesome and feel like $1 million.
Right.
What we're talking about is getting people to respect their physical body, right? So shifting exercise and eating well from something people feel they should do or that they have to do, right? Because everybody knows they should be doing it,
Right.
to something they want to do because they not only respect their physical body, but they respect themselves, and they want to take care of themselves.
Right, right. So I know it, in my work as in my world of coaching, I am very aware of the language that comes out of people's mouths about places they want to go when it gets framed as, well, I should
Yes,
versus
exactly right.
I want to, right?
Sure.
Um, you mentioned trust and safety,
Hmm.
and I would put our sense of physical self up on the top of that list of things that are pretty difficult and vulnerable making for many of us to talk about and dig into. So I'm curious in your work how you quickly attend to, in your relationship with your clients, that creation of trust and safety.
No, absolutely. I think we consider it a supreme responsibility. We are taking care of someone's body, not only in terms of the workouts that we're doing with them,
Right.
but in the guidance that we're giving, the advice that we're doling out. So we take that incredibly seriously. It starts, again, it's a process, it's a relationship building process. So we do an initial consultation with all of our clients. It's not your typical sales pitch that you might get at another gym. It's really a conversation to get to know the person. And to your point, Keith, we're listening to the language they use as they describe their journey, and where they would like to be.
Right.
We are trained in kind of deciphering this language to get to the heart of the matter during the conversation. And we let them know quite clearly that if they're going to entrust us with these goals and these objectives, then we're going to hold them accountable for that.
Right.
And I think that in and of itself, knowing, oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's
That's
quite
not
all
going to
right.
stop right now. Oh, that's crazy. And I turned off all my notifications. I
You're good.
apologize, Keith.
No,
You might
don't
want
worry.
to talk over me. It'll stop in a minute. Go for it.
So you just mentioned language, that you listen for very specific language from your clients in these first few conversations. And I would argue that probably the most foundational skill for anyone who facilitates an effective helping conversation is listening. So what
Yes.
exactly do you listen for?
Yes, absolutely. And I apologize again for that. Yeah. So, like I said, the language you mentioned earlier, the shoulds and the haves, right? Like those kind of, I have to do this. The doctor told me I have to do this. I should do this. Also, there typically is a lot of language where they're reflecting and talking about the past of somebody
Hmm.
they were previously. I've had people literally bring in pictures of themselves to me of 20 years prior, and they want to be that person again, right? So, in their mind, they want to look the way they look in that photo, but what they're likely actually reflecting back on, is how they felt in that photo, what was
Right.
going on in their life during that time. Now, again, this is not necessarily something I can just point out right off the bat. It needs to kind of be gradual in how we bring their attention, to the fact that maybe they're feeling a bit nostalgic, or maybe there's something going on in their life right now that has disrupted their self-worth.
Right.
Typically, also, when we ask people to articulate their goals, it's interesting. We get everything from very broad, certainly I want to lose weight, to very specific, I need to start interviewing for new jobs and I don't feel confident walking in for the interview,
Right.
right? Those are the types of things that we really like to drill into, is how does someone's journey in our system, how does their relationship with fitness affect their lives outside of the workout itself?
Right. Right. So another aspect of the helping conversation that can be so challenging is goal setting, right? Because
Yes.
as you just said, sometimes people will just present with this big hairy audacious goal. Sometimes it's very tiny. I know in my world often goal setting conversations start with just a lack of clarity. So I
Sure.
know out there in the goal setting world, there's models like SMART goals and things like that. Is there some very specific way you begin that conversation with the folks that you help?
Yes, absolutely. So we do throw the ball in their court, right, to see what they say first and foremost. And then we encourage them to get as specific as possible, right? So let me take the generic, I want to lose weight. I want to know how much and by when, right? And I let them necessarily, first they articulate that. And then I will chime in with my professional opinion in terms of making sure that we're setting ourselves up practically for
Right,
that,
right,
right? It's very important to me that in this journey that we are creating smaller incremental goals that ultimately lead to that sense of accomplishment and allow the client to build some momentum. I think that's one of the places most people go wrong, both in our industry in general. They overshoot.
right.
And I'm probably one of the most ambitious people I know. So in no way am I saying like lower your standards or don't shoot for the moon and stars, but you need to understand that there are stepping stones to get there. And quite frankly, you need to celebrate those milestones as well.
Right, right. Right. I really like what you were saying about putting a time period on it. Somewhere
Yes.
along the line in my career, I once heard that a goal without a time period is simply a wish.
Yes, I love that.
Right. So
Yeah.
asking people, it's also just a whole nother level of commitment and accountability that I'm marking a date on the calendar at which time I would like to be able to say I achieved this goal.
Absolutely. And if not, if you haven't achieved it, then you should use that time to assess why you
Right.
haven't,
Right.
right? And maybe possibly, redirect your
Yeah.
focus. But like you said, without a timeline, it's just completely open ended and very little good comes from that.
Right. Right. So as you have been moving through your career in helping people around their physical and larger sense of wellness, who have been some mentors of yours?
Sure, absolutely. I would say, even when you said, as a child and kind of growing up, where did you learn to help people? I think I learned about the helping conversation, or at least this concept of kind of inquiring and asking questions, honestly, through my parents. I don't know if it was like a deliberate part of their parenting style, but anything that I approached them with, whether it was something I wanted to do or a problem I was having, I was greeted with a question.
Mm,
And it was their way of getting me to talk through my own stuff
right.
and kind of problem solve on my own. So that was very helpful for me, and it's taught me both personally and professionally to think strategically
Yeah.
and to not simply react, like to kind of take that step back and to reflect on what's going on and why it's going on.
Right.
As I got into my career, and as I referenced earlier, I took a lot of twists and turns. So there's always kind of been this underlying, am I in the right place, right? And certainly I've put my own twist on the fitness side of things. But at one point, as I started to really establish myself in the fitness industry and grow a clientele, I had a lot of encouragement from some of my clients themselves who had successful careers, who were kind of questioning me as to why I wasn't, taking the next step in terms of developing my approach, right? Because I kept kind of running into a wall within a corporate environment of this is how the things are done and you need to stay in this little box.
Right.
And I kind of kept hitting my head on that wall. So they started to kind of push back. My clients, some of whom I'm still in touch with, I still train, that we're incredibly grateful for, and pushed me on the concept of, the what will happen if you branch out on your own and develop this thing. And of course, it was certainly scary to even just think about it at the time. But having that level of dialogue in and of itself taught me that they believed in me and saw my potential.
Right. Right. It strikes me that from your parents to these clients you're talking about, you have had some very brilliant coach-like people in your life, who
Absolutely.
have
Absolutely.
approached you with questions, not with answers.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. Even with our coaching, and we train our staff. I have a very highly talented, skilled staff that is specializes in the anatomy in the body. So this type of conversation is not necessarily natural to them. So a lot of the coaching we do with our staff is about how to have this level of conversation, how even to read somebody's body language when they walk into the room, and in our current world when they're on the screen, because we do the bulk of our work virtually. And teaching them just that. It's about asking the right questions. It's not necessarily about having the answer. I
Mm,
think a lot of people feel that when they want to help somebody, they need to be able to just guide and give them every step they're going to take. But oftentimes that right question just sparks exactly what is needed
right.
for the individual to provide their own impetus.
Right. Right. So that's a wonderful in my world. I always think about how can I treat the people I work with as the best resource in their own lives.
Absolutely.
That I don't have any answers for them because most days I can barely keep my what together. But I can listen well and I can ask good questions and I can be curious and I can be accepting and I can create this safe and trusting space. And that what I find is inevitably people have their answers, even when the conversation started with them thinking that they don't.
100%. And I think to your point, I don't know that people get to talk enough these days. There's a lot of communication, if you want to call it that, going on, right? But I find that people just really need to be heard.
Yes.
So as you said, simply listening and letting to them speak. And where appropriate, I also find validating, like just even repeating what you hear them saying,
right.
so they know that you're there and you're engaged with them.
Right.
To your point, inevitably, they find their own way, or at least start down the right path of that.
Yeah.
So that time is so precious and valuable.
Yeah. Your point about validating, it just popped into my head. In the modality of motivational interviewing, they actually have, through their research, they've come up with this ratio, and I've read it as either 3-to-1 or 5-to-1. So it's somewhere in that. We'll just say 4-to-1. When you are engaging with someone, especially at first, and creating that level of trust and safety, that you are to do 4 reflections. Wow, what I hear you saying is for every question, because it's the reflections that help people explore before we maybe run into our own need to problem solve by starting to ask a lot of questions. Yeah, so that validation part and that listening part is powerful.
That makes a lot of sense. It's really interesting. Absolutely. I think that works for interpersonal relationships too. If people only took a minute, right? Everybody would feel a tiny bit more understood.
Right. The other thing I'm thinking about, and you're saying that, and I agree wholeheartedly, I think in our rush world, even when we are asked a question, we're often not given a whole lot of time to answer, to ponder, to think about. And so our answer ends up being very surfacey. And it sounds like you really give people that space and that time to go deeper.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't mean to attribute everything back to social media, but if you look at the way a lot of people opt to communicate, and even text message, right? Everything has become very abbreviated. I mean, we have taken sentences, paragraphs, emotions, and boiled them down to little emojis. So I also think people have lost a little bit their ability to articulate how they're feeling. So, journal writing, for example, is something that we do extensively with our clients, and they usually go kicking and screaming into it initially. There's a lot of, resistance to that. And we start very small. Like one of the first things I ask my clients to do is every morning jot down 3 adjectives that describe how they're feeling. So they understand this doesn't need to be like a Dear Diary pursuit, that they just need to take a moment to check in with themselves. Because honestly, I feel that the work we're doing, our ultimate goal is to get the client to learn how to do it themselves, or at least start to probe and ask some of these questions on their own time.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, Suzanne, this model that you use. Was it Whole Foods?
Primary foods.
Primary foods. Thank you.
Yes.
So I'm always really curious with folks who do a helping conversation of the model or the modality or the theory that guides that their conversation is grounded in. So could you talk a little bit more about that? Because it sounds like that is really fundamental to the work that you do.
Sure. And I was first introduced to this when I was studying nutrition, because, and again, having grown up and trained in the dance world extensively, I had a really, pretty extensive background in nutrition and calories and fat and carbs and protein and all of that stuff. However, again, I was very curious about why some people were able to piece together healthy eating, balanced eating better than others, because our relationship with our food, in my opinion, really tells us a lot about ourselves. Okay. So primary foods, and you can even do a quick Google search for this, and you should be able to find a visual. It looks like a wheel, and there's spokes on the wheel for all of these various elements. As I reference, education, spirituality, career, relationships, joy, just simply having some fun in your life. Right. And what you do, it's a basic exercise where you go through and you kind of ask your clientele to, they put a little dot on the spoke of the wheel corresponding to how satisfied they are with that element of their life. And they go around the wheel and they kind of rate every spoke, and then they connect the dots. And ultimately, to see a balanced life, you want to see something that resembles a circle.
Right.
But ultimately, what most people end up producing is this very jagged shape. And for many of them, it's eye-opening. They weren't necessarily aware that their career was that, much of a detraction from the rest of their life.
Right.
So what we ultimately end up doing is, once we identify the source that seems to be causing the most grief, we start there in conjunction with the diet, the exercise, else. We tell them we can't have a proper conversation here unless we're addressing this in some you into the hands of another professional who can do that for you.
Right. Right. Beautiful. So I know in my world, we have a tool that sounds a little bit similar. We call it the Wheel of Life, and it's similar.
Very
and it's
similar.
It asks people just, how are you doing in all these different contexts, and do you appreciate, as you're saying, that you exist in different contexts in your life?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think the difference with naming this primary foods is to get people to understand that these other areas nourish them.
Beautiful.
I think that's a really important word.
Yes.
And B, that when they're feeling a void in one of those areas, or sometimes multiple, that they typically opt to fill it with food.
Yes.
And it's not a conscious decision, right? It's typically subconscious that something's off. We do a lot of food journaling with our clients as well. And we use an online resource that allows us to provide feedback essentially in real time, so that we could catch the issues as they're happening, as opposed to, somebody submitting a week's worth of journals, and then I find that they had a really bad few days earlier in the week.
Right.
So for example, when we find that somebody is repetitively eating, late at night, I don't even care if they're snacking on carrot sticks. If they're eating at 11, midnight, there's a reason for that. So we have to start asking some questions. What's going on that you're reaching for that? Because let's be honest, food is comfort.
Yes,
it is for all of us, right? So we need to kind of make that realization. And then, as I say to my clients all the time, be curious about why you do the things you do.
Right. Right. And at least in my life, Suzanne, I would argue that the more healthy the food is, the less comforting it is.
We got to work on that a little bit.
Right. I am not the one who reaches for carrot sticks.
No, I don't, nor am I, or nor do I know anybody who does. But my reason for using the carrot sticks is to teach people that even if it's a healthy
That's
food,
right.
if you're reaching for it for the wrong reasons, right? The habit's still there, the underlying dependency, if you will. And that's what we need to break.
Yeah, beautiful. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit from your work with clients, because you have built a very successful business.
Thank you.
And I'm always very curious there about the components of a helping conversation that you brought to that endeavor, because that is all about relationship and communication. And so talk a little bit about how you have grown Upper Deck Fitness.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly been quite a journey. From the beginning, when I set out to design the brand, and I say brand because I was never interested in owning a gym.
Right.
We have really big plans for this brand. And I referenced earlier that we view it as a lifestyle brand where the fitness piece is just one component. But we're very solutions orientated. I want to understand why people aren't doing the things they know they should be doing. And it's everything from fitness isn't always terribly convenient. It's not terribly affordable. The motivation factor. So we've had a lot of conversations, and certainly throughout my career, a lot of my ideas and my inspiration have come from watching my clients, from listening to my clients about their struggles and their journeys. Because quite frankly, the fitness industry is not solutions orientated. It's very much based on the experience, which is great in the moment, but in terms of that having a lasting effect, it really doesn't have any legs. So we were certainly solutions orientated. And then when it came to marketing, if you will, communicating our messaging and letting people understand how we're different, because there's a bit of a stigma within the fitness industry, right? That, for example, you need to be fit these days before you even walk into a gym.
Right.
You need to look a certain way. You need to wear a certain branding of clothes. And we are the anti that. So in terms of our conversations and how we market ourselves, I would say it's all about transparency. It's quite vulnerable, to be honest, to kind of share our story, and we share our clients' stories quite a bit, so that people can see real people, not fitness models,
Right.
not photoshopped people, benefiting from the type of work we do. And typically what we're applauding, if you will, what we put up on a pedestal, yes, we'll talk about weight loss and stuff of that nature. But when I have a client tell me that he's now able to run around the backyard with his grandkids, that's something we want to shout from the rooftops.
Right.
Or that person who went in confidently to the interview and nailed the job, that they've been on the hunt for.
Yeah.
So we I'd say we're big at storytelling in terms of what we do. And also being honest about the fact that at times we struggle and we pick ourselves back up, and we talk about what's involved in that.
Right. Right. In your role as the founder of Upper Deck, how do you approach your relationship with the people who work for you?
Yeah, that I'd say that hands down is the most important relationship I have. We have an incredible team, some of which I've been very blessed to have along with me in various forms over my entire career. We've been working together, and I kind of just keep pulling them along with me because they're that good. But they would tell you too, my approach has changed and evolved over the years. So we communicate a lot. We meet weekly as a staff, which is a lot in our industry. Fitness professionals are typically independent contractors. They work in a couple different places. That was a large impetus for me in designing Upper Deck. I wanted the gym to be a place, the brand to be an operation where people could work without having to wear multiple hats and, bounce around and carry different jobs. So what we do is we make it very clear to our staff that we're invested in their development, and that we trust them with our clientele, but we have these levels of conversations about what comes with that trust. How is it appropriate to maintain the trust? We talk a lot about relationships, and just like in romantic relationships and personal relationships, somebody once said to me, "You're always interviewing for that job." When you're in a personal relationship, and that always stuck with me. So, we talk a lot about complacency, and how to identify when you're getting there, when your client's getting there, when is it time to pivot? My staff is so trained on anatomy and physicality and mechanics. I tell them all the time, I don't have much else to teach you there. What I'm trying to teach you, are some people skills,
Right.
that will inevitably increase your client's loyalty to you, and then certainly to Upper Deck.
Right. Right. So sounds like really passing on to the folks who work for you how best to do this helping conversation, how to create trust and safety in their work with folks.
Yes, 100%. In our neck of the woods, we're here in Fairfield County, Connecticut, and gyms are a dime a dozen. The pandemic is certainly changing that landscape,
Right.
but there are trainers everywhere. So I learned early on in my career, which is where this helping conversation concept came from, that I needed to do something a little different. The workout itself wasn't enough. So that's what we really want to, instill in our staff, that in order for them to have longevity in their career and truly make a difference, there needs to become another layer of support outside of just the person shows up, they get a really great workout, and they've got that accountability for the hour that they're there,
Right.
and then they head home, So it's a little, it could be heavy at times, quite frankly, we carry a lot, and that trust again is not taken lightly, but it's incredibly rewarding. And from a business perspective, I hate that treating people like people is a point of differentiation in the business world today, but it is.
Yes.
It's the biggest feather in our cap, right? That we truly care and take care of our client base.
Yeah. So you beat me to my next question because you mentioned COVID. So as a business owner, in terms of your relationship with your employees and your relationship with your clientele, what has it been like over the last few months?
I'm still struggling to find words to describe what this experience has been like. We were, on one hand, we were very blessed. We had a online virtual platform that had been in place since 2018. Again, going back to the concept of being solutions orientated, we saw the need to deliver high quality workouts into people's homes to make it more convenient, more practical, and quite frankly, to attract that person who was intimidated coming into the gym in the first place. So we had a great online platform. So when COVID hit, and it hit us very hard here in Fairfield County, Connecticut, we had to close our doors on March 16th. And we literally overnight seamlessly transitioned all of our in-person operations, and we have three physical locations, to our virtual platform. It was a lifeline, quite honestly, for our clients. Yes, we had to do it to sustain our business and our revenue, but I have had so many incredible testimonials come my way about what it was like for them to have access to us during the darkest part initially of the pandemic. All stuff that I shared regularly with my staff. We met even more frequently, albeit virtually,
Right.
because I needed to keep their morale up because they're on the front lines. And when you're on the screen in particular, your energy needs to be, through the roof in order to be properly read. So I let them know regularly, it's important to me that they always understand the importance of their work, that the value that it has, and that it's not just that workout. So it's been a trying time, but I would also say it's been a very defining time for our brand. We've shown our true colors, and that we're not just an operation focused on dollars and cents. Of course, that's been a high point of stress. We need to keep our operation functioning, and we're
Sure.
still legally obligated to
Right.
three physical locations. But it really kind of shone light on the fact of how much power there is in being more than just a gym.
Right. Right. I'm curious about one aspect of the helping conversation around how we think as helping people about this concept of the motivation within our clients. So I will always say that I've reached this point in my thinking and in my work where I have no belief whatsoever that I am able to motivate another human being, that my
Hmm.
job is to help them identify their own.
Sure.
Your thoughts, especially during this time of COVID, where continuing to engage in our physical health and our spiritual
Yes.
health probably requires a heightened level of motivation. How do you
Sure.
do that conversation with your clients?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And this is something I've kind of grappled with a lot in my career. A coach I actually trained under very early on in my path into fitness said to me, "We're not motivators, we're educators."
Mm,
And I was just like, I think we're a bit of both. Like, I wasn't really sure about that, being so definitive.
right.
I will say again, during COVID, during the pandemic, so what we do at Upper Deck in our virtual gym is we utilize just like this, like Zoom, but we use another platform called video, two-way video, where our clients are actually working out with a coach live. The coach is doing the entire workout with them. And then there's another coach who has their eyes on them at home, providing feedback using their name in real time. So for example, when we were going through those workouts, and let's be honest, I've done two already this morning, and it's still happening. We're not out of the woods with this thing yet, not even
Right.
close. We've been very transparent with our clientele that we think it's going to get worse before it gets better as we head into the fall.
Right.
But we talk about the fact that, again, we're struggling. I'll say it was hard for me to get out of bed this morning.
Mm,
I think that level of transparency, and I'm not saying it just to say it, to be clear, right? It makes it relatable, and it makes them feel less bogged down by
yes.
their struggle, and the whole "in it together" type lingo, right? And we don't say that just for fluff. It's true. We're all here. We're all showing up for one another, which to me is so symbolic for so many other things in life right now. But it has not been easy. And I will say we started really strong. Like I referenced March 16th, our facilities are not still fully open. We're only allowed to function at 25% capacity. So the vast majority of our business is still done virtually. And we hit, after, I'd say for the first month, everybody was kind of riding a little bit of a high. They were really proud of themselves, right? Like they were still in the groove. They were working out. They were proud of Upper Deck. They were proud of being part of the community. And then undoubtedly we predicted it as a staff. I said, they're going to come crashing down. and we got to be ready, and they did. It was the body language, everything changed on the screen. Their frequency of workouts started to dip, but they may not realize it, but we work very extensively behind the scenes to talk about how we can pick them back up out of that.
Right. I love that piece about all of you as the leaders having the courage to say, I'm struggling today, not a good day. And I was having this conversation a couple of months ago with a client of mine who is a leader in a human service organization, and she was struggling at the start of COVID with being able to say that, like operating under this assumption that us leaders are supposed to always look like we have everything together. And there's some really interesting research in the neurochemical world that when leadership shows vulnerability, it actually creates upregulates the production of oxytocin in the brain of the people who they lead, which is our connection neurochemical, right? So when people see that, they don't see it as weakness. They see it for all the reasons you said. It confirms that, hey, all of us humans, we're struggling with this stuff right now.
No doubt. It took me a while to learn that in my career because I kind of initially didn't want to let down the facade, right? Like I'm a brand in and of myself. But one of the things I realize, and I say this to my clients all the time, one of the reasons I know how to coach you is because I'm constantly coaching myself. Right? So you shouldn't take advice from someone who's never faced adversity, who gets up and skips out of bed every morning, and when I say that to them, it usually kind of clicks. And if anything, I think the fact that they then see me with the smile on my face and they see me trying inspires them to do the same.
Yeah. So one of the other cornerstones for me of a really effective helping conversation, which you have been talking about for the last 40 minutes, is being strength-based, seeing the strengths in the people that we work with. So I always like asking the question to my guests, as you do your work, what are some of the strengths, positive attributes, talents, skills that you exhibit every day in facilitating your helping conversation with others?
Sure. And I love that you asked that. It's something I also do with my clients. We talk about, I always tell them I'm here to be a mirror, and to kind of reflect back to you what I see, and to get them to understand their strengths and their weaknesses. Without a doubt, hands down, empathy is, a hallmark of my day to day. I don't know that everybody properly understands what that term means. It often is confused with sympathy. It requires a really hefty dose of vulnerability, to put yourself into someone's shoes, and not just simply to think about what it's like to be them, but to think about what it feels like to be in their world. It's incredibly powerful though, because once you kind of transport yourself there, you're able to see the solutions that are needed a little bit clearer, in my opinion. Once I do that, the second piece of the puzzle has a lot to do with prioritizing. Oftentimes a client comes to me, and there might be 15 things that I want them to work on right off the bat. But my job for them is to kind of implement the change in a way that, again, not only sticks and will be long lasting, but allows them to feel that sense of accomplishment and again, to feel good about themselves. We call them building blocks. I know we need to address this, but we really can't do that until we do these things. So I have a bit of a logistical brain. It's how I've been able to grow and build the brand. So I really certainly apply that when working with my clients. And the last piece, quite frankly, and this is probably what I struggle with a little bit the most, but is patience. I have to remember that this is their journey, and even though I see a lot of things they could be doing differently, they have to get there on their own time and under their own terms. And they have to really be ready to be there in the first place.
Right. I want to comment on what you said about empathy, because I think empathy as a skill is a incredibly underappreciated skill. It's underappreciated for how complex it is. And as you said, for how difficult it is, because it really requires us as a human being to go to our own vulnerable place. To dig into maybe where this person I'm helping with is also. That's not easy.
No, I totally agree. And it's something we work on with our staff as well in terms of the language they're using, how they're choosing to communicate with their client. Simply telling them, remember who you're talking to, remember your audience.
Right.
Even in the course of a workout, there are a lot of different ways people are encouraged and motivated. Some people respond very well to the tough love, come on, push through it. You've got this. Other people hear that and they shut down.
Right.
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 And even in a group setting, my staff is incredibly well versed at customizing
Yeah.
how they're talking to people, so that people feel like they're being individually coached. But it is, I'll be honest, it's something I've incorporated for so long. I didn't necessarily know that empathy was a skill.
Yes.
But as I work to teach it to other people and I realize that their initial knowledge of it is so limited, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah. The other thing you just said that I love I do a lot of work in the world of substance use disorder treatment and recovery. And one of the newer concepts over the last 10 or 15 years has been this concept of multiple pathways of recovery. That if you were to poll the 22 or 23 million people in our country who would identify as being in recovery, what that looks like is different. And so what you were just saying about that work you and your colleagues do of how is this journey going to work for this person, and that everybody's journey is going to look and sound a little bit different.
Absolutely. And again, I feel that's where our industry really fails people, is it's very cookie cutter.
Right.
They want to make it as simple as possible, kind of 1, 2, 3, follow these steps and you're golden. It doesn't work that way. Because everybody comes into the journey with a completely different history.
Right.
And that's something, not just a health and a physical medical history, but a psychological history as well. Most people's relationship with diet and exercise was formed at a very young age.
Right.
So that's something, and even having that conversation with them, which typically invokes a lot of tears and is very emotional. And that's another thing I've learned is that, sometimes you have to be careful with some of the questions that you present to people, because it can open up the floodgates and put them in a very vulnerable spot.
Right. As you do your work, whether it's during this time of COVID or not, of being a successful business owner and working with your own clientele, what are some of the primary challenges of doing all of that for you?
Personally?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, these are areas that I certainly need to improve upon. I have not done a great job of protecting my own energy. And not just certainly physically. I easily work a 12-hour day most days of the week. I mean, in terms of pouring myself empty, and not in turn pouring myself full.
Right.
So I've been working pretty deliberately on managing expectations in terms of, client communications, when people can have access to me, how long they can expect to hear back from me, stuff of that nature. I take their needs very seriously, but sometimes that gets in the way.
Right.
And with that goes setting some boundaries, in terms of protecting my time and understanding, I will say this was ingrained in me from the dance world. You didn't stop until you were basically broken. That was kind of, and you were awarded for that, quite frankly.
Right.
So that was really ingrained in my head, and I won't pretend to say that it's completely dismantled at this point. But I've been working really hard on practicing what I preach in terms of kind of integrating some moments into my day to recharge, as opposed to just barreling through and having to get to the weekend or whatever the end goal might be.
Beautiful. And then the flip side, what would be some of the greatest joys to you from doing the work that you do?
Yeah. God, there are so many. I say this with so much humility. I cannot tell you how many messages, emails, texts I get that talk about life changing. You've changed my life. And that is so heavy to me in the best way possible. The work we do is not temporary. And I know that even if somebody opts to stop working with us, or even if they head to another gym, that what we've done is ingrained in them. And I see clients 10 years down the road, and and they say to me, I hear your voice inside my head, stuff of that nature. So I know that, again, talking about rewiring, that we
Right.
made some progress there. And that's just, I'll be honest, as much as I am passionate about people to be healthy and for them to feel physically strong, because I think so much comes from that. I, at this point in my career, and my journey, am so interested in how that impacts their life in other ways. So some of the testimonials I get have nothing to do with feats of strength.
Right.
And that's, that kind of makes me feel like I've arrived, or at least, hit on that niche of this is the work we need to be doing.
Right.
Fitness as a vehicle is what we say.
Right. Right. So as we start to come close to the end of our conversation today, I always like asking my guests that if you had an opportunity to talk with someone who is thinking about entering your field, doing the helping conversation you do, what your words of wisdom to them would be. And I want to ask you that actually in 3 parts. So the first part would be, what would your words of wisdom be to somebody who is thinking about entering the field as a trainer, or some type of health coach?
Sure. I would say that they need to understand that they're treating a lot more than the person's body.
Right.
That in order for them to help their client achieve optimal health, they're going to have to think outside the box. And unfortunately, most of the certifications and kind of the conventional addressing that, it's very black and white the way the fitness world works.
Right.
But yet that's not the way it works in the real world.
Right. If you had the opportunity to have a conversation with somebody who was considering becoming a business owner in your field, what would your words of wisdom be?
It's not for the faint of heart. It's also not for everybody. I see a lot of trainers go into gym ownership simply because, and I don't mean simply, but they have a robust clientele, and it seems like the logical next step, but they don't necessarily have business acumen.
Right.
If you don't love being in the office, if you don't love looking at the spreadsheet and kind of dialing in and thinking about marketing and communication, you should probably, if you're truly interested in simply helping people, you should probably stick to being a coach. I don't mean to deter anybody, but for me, that's why I did open the brand, is because the business brain is actually first and foremost in my head.
Right.
It takes up the most real estate, but it's, you have to, again, regardless if you're going to do it, you need to think about unmet needs. What is not being addressed out there? Because simply providing a workout, I don't care how great it is not enough. It's not special enough.
Right. Right. And so part 3 of that question for me would be, what your words of wisdom would be to somebody who is considering opening a business in your field who is a woman?
I think it's a huge asset, to be honest with you, even though my entire staff, well, not my entire staff, my staff is predominantly male. I've worked with men most of my life. Our client base, however, is predominantly female, which is typical in most gyms. I think it can be a huge asset, particularly if you have the courage, as you said earlier, to be vulnerable. It's not always easy for somebody to look at me and to hear that I deal with body image issues, which I do. But having that conversation and breaking the guard down so that you're not put up on a pedestal as Superwoman,
Right.
can be very, very powerful. But I will say, and I don't mean this for anything other than factually based, I don't typically view myself, I'm not hyper aware that I'm a female in the field, right? Every step that I've had to take on this journey, walking into banks, lawyers, et cetera, I just walk in knowing that I'm highly qualified and really damn good at what I do.
Yep.
And I think that's important for women to hear, that if you're going into a situation defining yourself as the underdog, then guess what? There you are,
Right. Right.
So I typically kind of throw gender to the curb.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. So related to that, and because I so dig the name of this, I do not want to end without asking about badass and beautiful. So
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, Badass and Beautiful started as a passion project about 8 years ago or so. It was a personal writing endeavor. Writing's my second love, or
Right.
maybe my first these days. I don't really know. But I created this blog as I was kind of documenting a pretty big transition in my life. And despite the fact that many people think I am somehow referring to myself with those words, badass and beautiful, what I'm talking about is the concept of living a badass and beautiful life, so that you can be brave, you can take risks and have all the courage in the world, but you can also kind of have your moments where you're crying behind closed doors, and also are just down for the count. So the blog itself, which is going through a major revamp right now, we're really excited about it. Really, again, hits on that concept of vulnerability, and how you have to be able to admit what's really going on in order to change it and to continue to evolve your life.
Beautiful, beautiful. If folks, Suzanne, are interested in learning more about you and more about Upper Deck Fitness, because I'm assuming that maybe one of the silver linings of COVID and things being online is that you can interact with clients way beyond your area in Connecticut. Where would you suggest people go to learn a little bit more about your business?
Yeah, absolutely. And we are expanding across the entire country right now. And we encourage people to check us out. Don't assume that just because you've done some Zoom workouts that you know what this is. It's not like that at all. But upperdeckfitness.com is where they can find everything out. And there's even a link to Badass and Beautiful there. So they can learn more about me and our team, and most importantly, our philosophy and approach.
Beautiful. And lastly, I do want to ask, Fairfield County Business Journal's 40 Under 40 Award. What was that?
So they, and I'm running out of, I'm not much longer under 40. I got it several years ago, but they acknowledge the 40 top up and coming people to be watched, Beautiful. Basically, in various fields. So the irony to that was I was just a trainer at the time when I received that award. So just kind of scratching the surface of my potential. But that type of recognition is really important. It goes a long way.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Suzanne Palazzo, empowerment coach, founder of Upper Deck Fitness, badass and beautiful. Thank you so much for sitting in with me today. This was a wonderful conversation, and I hope for our listeners that it has expanded maybe their perspective of what someone in your industry can do in helping people.
Absolutely. I so appreciate you having me. Thank you, Keith.
Best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
And I thank all of you for sitting in with us today and listening to this story about this great business that Suzanne has built and the work that she is doing, not only, again, in the Connecticut area, but now expanding nationally. Please, 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 if anything about what we talked about today sparks an interest or a curiosity, upperdeckfitness.com. Go and check out the work that Suzanne and her colleagues are doing. I thank you for sitting in with us today on this episode of The Helping Conversation. Please join us for our next episode as we continue to explore and celebrate the practice, art, and science of the helping conversation. Have a great day, everybody.
We thank you for sitting in on our discussion today on just one unique version of the helping conversation. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's podcast, so we sincerely invite you to follow, rate, and most importantly, review our episodes. Please join us for our next episode as we continue the exploration and celebration of the practice, art, and science of the helping conversation.